So, as I said, I know some people know quite a lot about us and some don't. We are right in the heart of London. We are a very small area, a square mile, but we have, I think, probably one of the densest areas of office occupation in Europe. Pre-COVID, we had 500,000 people coming into the square mile every day to work, and only an 8,000 resident population. So it's a very different dynamic to most cities, and even outer London is very different, where you've got much greater mix of residential and also people driving. People don't drive into the city of London, but we've still got vehicles, and we've still got essential vehicles that are servicing those buildings, servicing where people are working. So we know we still needed to tackle our air quality. And as we said, we started this project stating that we would put a zero emission zone in. And that came out of the kind of context of the fact that Transport for London, as our higher regulatory transport authority, was supporting boroughs and us as the next tier down, supporting us in trying to put in local zero emission zones. And really trying to kind of restrict further on local areas and where it was right and where you had hotspots, because they were doing the sort of bigger picture of that gradual shift, a more gradual shift, but affecting every vehicle on the road, which is being done by Transport for London. So as I said, we'd already had 90% of people arriving at their final destination on foot. And so that kind of is that point about equity and why should they be squeezed onto the pavements when they are the dominant mode? And should we be trying to make that shift, not only for the air quality improvement, but also for the fairness of space? That's a photograph taken pre-COVID, but we are starting to see people numbers back in a similar fashion. I think we've got something like 60% of an average of 60% back on our streets, and then weekends are busier than that, 60% of pre-COVID times. So the pilot area that we are working on, the top left of that picture, it shows you the streets that are in our pilot area, and those coloured purple are the ones that were predicted to have the biggest growth. Because although we already had 500,000 people coming in, the city's attitude towards providing more and more modern buildings for offices, accompanied by the opening of the Crossrail stations, Liverpool Street being one of them, which is just the north of the picture, and further west is Farringdon, which is also walking distance. And then Bank Station as well, which is probably the biggest interchange on the underground network, all of which were producing figures saying how many more people we're going to have coming out onto our streets in the peak times. I don't know if you can see the figures, but anyway. In addition to putting in zero emission restrictions, which is what we proposed, we've got a number of complementary supporting measures, changing the fleet, and we've been leading by example, trying to get even some of our heavy goods vehicles onto zero emission. So that's our waste collection. And then we've been trying to enable the market for cargo bikes. I know a lot of other places have been doing it, but what's been encouraging is seeing that the businesses that provide deliveries are very keen to shift to cargo bikes. There's lots of interesting styles and different electric assisted bikes coming out on the market. So the push from the commercial sector is there, and they're quite keen that we provide the space. So that's the space for them to store their bikes and sort their parcels, but also that we start putting restrictions on the streets which favour them over conventional vehicles. So that's a strong part of our supporting measures. That's a visualization on one of our target streets, and the famous Gherkin building, which is on St Mary Axe, again in our area. So then COVID hit and all those plans went out the window. And I know it's been the same for everybody. What our attention got diverted to were which were the streets we needed to put some protective measures on, and 10 streets were picked as being the critical ones for cycling and walking improvements, even on a temporary basis. We put some bus only points in some of our streets. We made wider footway, we made more cycling measures and more parklets as well. So those were the opportunities. And I think that partly gave us a bit of a demonstration of what we could do. It also, we had some major advantages in that we were working faster with our neighbours and with TfL. I think our relationships improved, our working relationships improved over those times because everybody needed to be a bit speedier in reacting, and also how we spent money had changed, how everything we did changed. So there was a lot of interesting experiments. But coming back to our pilot area and what did we do there? We were supposed to be putting in restrictions on the light blue streets. They went on hold and they're still on hold. But we did put restrictions on our other location that had been identified for a zero emission zone. We had 2 identified in our long-term plans. So that area on the top and the north of the picture, Beach Street was the first zero emission street in the country, and we trialled it during COVID, which sort of again had some pros and cons. And we, with TfL, some restrictions went in on, you can see that the other 2 dark green arrows are on the edge of our original pilot area. So we haven't tackled the streets that we planned to tackle, but we've tackled the boundary streets. That was about restricting vehicle movements, but prioritising buses and giving more space to people walking and cycling. Beach Street produced some interesting lessons, and I think we have been able to feed those back to TfL, and that's enabling TfL and us to pass on what we think was good and bad about the scheme, and for our neighbours to pick up if they choose to put in restrictions around emission controls. We had a lot of complaints about what does it actually mean. People don't understand those signs when they're going through quickly. They are the only signs we're allowed to use. We've within the project group, we've looked at what signage can we produce, and I'm sure this will get talked about a bit more by other people. Everyone's trying to come up with something that's legible and understandable, and also stands up in enforcement. We based it on, again, for standardization, so that we and anyone else putting emission restrictions in would follow the same guidance, TfL's guidance, but we found it really difficult to enforce B on that list, that minimum of 20 mile zero emission range. It was very difficult to find a mechanism to enforce that, but also we were practical about it and decided it didn't really matter if we'd got the database that told us whether vehicles were meeting the standard for CO2 and for NOx, then that's what mattered. So the clarity of signage, standardization was important. I've put a question mark there about the air quality improvements, because we were under such a questionable period of time because of COVID. Our traffic flows weren't at their normal pattern. So we're at the moment doing some more modelling. We, at the committee I was at earlier today, we actually were looking at, can we go out and consult the public on putting these restrictions in on a more permanent basis? And we've been modelling what the air quality differences are. We know that there'll be improvements on that street, but then it's that knock-on effect on other streets. So that's why it's still a bit of a question mark, but we know that for enforcing on A and C captured most of what we wanted. And this point about point closures versus a zone, we've come down very firmly that a point closure, so a restriction at some point on that street, will probably deliver you most of what you need. It gets you over some of the problems of legitimate access, where we had deliveries or taxis for people in the residential blocks. But you're still stopping the through traffic, and that's ultimately what we wanted to do, is stop the through traffic. So it gets our total volumes down, and then if it's an air quality issue as well, we're getting you air quality gains. Going back to our pilot area. So Bishopsgate is one of the main links that runs through the city, and then it leads on to one of the major bridges crossing into Southwark, so crossing the river to the south of London. And the restrictions that have gone in there were to allow buses and cycles through and restrict everything else. And you can see on the left-hand photo, there's also been temporary widening of the pavements. And this started as a temporary emergency scheme, and it's now continuing as an experimental scheme. And that allows us to do a lot more of the testing that we need to do. So this is very much a live experiment for us and TfL, and we're trying to make that work to get the benefits we want. I've just had my 2-minute warning, but I think I was about ready to wrap up. So the access issues perhaps are one of the things that are still a challenge for us, and we've started to see this as one of the most important things we need to do on the whole equity issue, that we don't want any of our streets to be exclusion zones for anyone. So we're trying to work with taxi drivers, but also with London Council, so that we're all finding a mechanism to make sure that we don't cut people off. And it's fine for able-bodied people, but what are we doing for those that need some extra support and have some extra issues? So I think, supporting measures very quickly, underground car parks for our delivery vehicles. We're still working on that. We've had some slowdown, but we're looking at 2 other sites as well. So we're still working on those. And people are back in the city. I think that's probably all I wanted to say. I'm sure.
Thank you, Samantha. I think just from your description of London, it's clear that you were affected, I think, more than any of our other cities, with so many people that were these hundreds of thousands that used to come into the city, that in the middle of the project where you were trying to restrict them, they all just stayed home. So we were doing something quite different that was expected there in the first place, but you sort of adapt, and as we were talking about earlier, you see what the space needs are and take the opportunity to experiment with that a little bit as well. Okay, can I invite Nimrod Levy up to the stage to talk about what's been going on in the city of Jerusalem?
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Nimrod Levy. I'm the Environmental Engineering Department Manager in the municipality of Jerusalem. I'm excited and glad to be here today. Short background about the city. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. This is our parliament building, the Knesset. The city has history of 5,000 years. It is the biggest city in Israel in terms of area, 126 square kilometers, and in terms of population, 1 million residents. Jerusalem is a multicultural and multi-languages city. The team. Just a minute. The team. From the Jerusalem municipality, It was Nir Margalit, responsible on air quality issues, and myself as the project leader. Both of us, me and Nir, are municipal workers. We also received a very significant help from external consultants, Tomer Shenhar, the one and the only, who managed the project, and Dr. Yoel Sigal on strategic and international aspects. Tomer and Yoel are with us today. The Minister of Environmental Protection supported us professionally and financially. 90% of the budget came from this source. And the Reveal Consortium, mainly Rupprecht Consult, Lucy Sadler, TRT, and Polis. Baseline, our starting point. We were starting with polluting buses all over Jerusalem. The initial situation could be defined as not meeting international standards. We were lacking public awareness about air quality and environmental issues. In our local reality, it was not obvious to tell people in Jerusalem that air pollution from transportation is a real problem, that we have to deal with it. Traditionally, many people still believe that we have fresh mountain air, clear as wine. What was the frame of work? The work process has been built upon the knowledge base which I've already described. The municipality, the Ministry of Environmental Protection in Israel, and Reveal. We started by identifying the sources of pollution. Then we explored a wide range of possible projects planned, for which later on we selected the project to implement. Then we delineated the implementation steps and finally began the project execution. The first plan, or the first step to reduce air pollution from transportation, started before the Reveal initiative. It included low emission zone in a very small area in the city center. We defined which are the polluting vehicles and restricted those vehicles from the area. This is the area, less than 1 square kilometer. This was the situation when Reveal initiative came into the picture. We started working on the second program on 2019. We followed all the steps of work process, but now with significant support of Reveal. We reached the conclusion that we can expand the low emission zone initiative to the entire city. From less than 1 square kilometer to low emission zone of 126 square kilometer. To execute the project, we understood that success can be achieved only after increasing public awareness, including among the political level. Therefore, we made a huge public campaign using a positive and optimistic approach. As can be seen from this movie that I will show you, the movie that describes disappearing of polluting trucks as a result of the low emission zone initiative.
המשרד להגנת הסביבה ועיריית ירושלים מודיעים, בירושלים אסורה כניסה לכלי רכב מזהמים, החל מספטמבר 2020. המשרד להגנת הסביבה ועיריית ירושלים מנקים את העיר מזיהום אוויר, פרטים באתר העירייה.
The project's execution also included legislation, formulation of the relevant municipal bylaw, road signs, and its positioning. You see the signs in Hebrew, Arabic, and English. Advertising. The public campaign used different types of media in a variety of languages, mainly Hebrew, Arabic, and English. The effectiveness was assessed in a survey with an excellent results. Public notice. Each driver of polluting vehicle received a formal letter presenting the new regulations and offering the opportunity to install a subsidized retrofit. 2 air monitoring stations were installed. And enforcement, a big issue. Enforcement, a big issue, a very complicated from a legislative point of view. Now we use mobile instrument since the LPR stationary cameras that we installed cannot be used due to privacy issues. I hope that we will solve it somehow. And again, back to the work process and another plan for the future. With Reveal as backup and as a driving force. We are looking forward to reducing air pollution from NRMM, non-road mobile machinery. According to our analysis and expectations, the NRMM initiative will be more cost-effective compared to the low emission zone initiative in terms of NOx emission reduction and particles emission reduction. We negotiated with the construction union and with the infrastructure companies that are active in the city. After consulting with all the necessary governmental agencies, we are now presenting another municipal bylaw to the City Council regarding NRMM. And finally, what we learned and gained from Reveal. Knowledge, especially when we were at points of decision-making, like expanding the low emission zone, or when we decided together to promote NRMM restrictions. We received significant feedback throughout the project that enabled us to understand our position. Legitimization. The connection with Reveal increased awareness about the projects, both at the local and the governmental level. Pareto principle. By sharing what we were doing, we were able to better understand how to have maximum impact with minimum disruption. And preceding setting for Israel, we came to believe that we act bottom up and influence the national and the international level. Thank you for listening. Many thanks to the Jerusalem team and to our colleagues in the Ministry of Environmental Protection, and to you all, our partners in Reveal.
Yeah, and a big thank you to Nimrod for presenting that to us. I think a couple of those key lessons coming out of here with this idea of you can't get people to agree to solve a problem that they don't see, which sounds a bit strange, but it's also lessons, and Samantha's nodding too, that were taken in London. And so part of the challenge for you before you could even start to solve the problem was to make people aware of it so that you could bring them along with you. And then this bubble campaign, which, as you said, was a friendly way to put that message out, because there are other ways of doing it too. You see some of these black smoke and saying, oh, this is what we're breathing, but you found a way to put that out there in that way. And the other thing, of course, is interesting with the legislation that you put in place. So maybe we'll come back and talk about that a little bit afterwards. You have some time for discussion afterwards with the cities. But I would like to invite up Matthieu Graindorge and Niels,
Kneppers.
Kneppers, the two of them talking about the city of Helmond, just so we know where we are.
So let's get familiar. Yes. Okay, so we will do a two-voice presentation together with Niels. I'm Matthieu from the city of Helmond, and Niels belongs to a small and medium enterprise called v-tron. So some contextual element first. Helmond is a medium-sized city located in the Netherlands, and it is the second city of the fastest growing regional economy in the Netherlands. In Helmond, the population has nearly doubled since the 80s, as well as the number of jobs. The number of companies has been multiplied by 3.5. It is foreseen that this growth will continue in the years to come. Helmond anticipates to build 15,000 new houses, 10,000 new working places, and to create 20,000 new jobs. This growth generates pressure both on housing and mobility. In review, Helmond has focused on two main actions. Together with v-tron, we have tested the efficiency of intelligent speed assistance to regulate the speed of vehicles in the city. Niels will present this part. We have aimed at designing a new district called Brainport Smart District with the ambition to become a zero emission zone. And this is the part I will focus on.
Yes, thank you, Matthieu. Well, then I will go next one. Say something about intelligent speed assistance. That is what we do for Helmond and together with Helmond. For that, ISA is the term of use. And the legal context there is actually from July 2022 now, all new developed models coming off factory need to be equipped with some kind of ISA system. It can be an informative system, but also a limiting system. And from 2024, actually all vehicles coming out of the factory need to be equipped with an ISA system. So that is kind of a big step for not only the road user, but also the road operator, road authority, of course, to make sure all the objectives and the data is in order. So our objectives in the review were also support Helmond's policy in how do you make sure the users comply to the speed limit and speed up the ISA deployment. And therefore we also developed our own ISA system. Our system is actually meant for the aftermarket, so the vehicles from, let's say, 2008 on till now, so that kind of fills the gap from all the vehicles that are produced from 2024 and now, and can have a big impact on the road. And that our system is based on inputs from both physical infrastructure, so speed signs, as well as a digital map, and that can be updated also. Well, we did actually two tests in Helmond together with Helmond, and one is in July 2020. There we had a kind of practical study or test with ISA. We equipped 10 vehicles with ISA and let them drive around for 4 days in a set region. And then we added vehicles every day on. And so we kind of tried to reach a certain penetration rate of ISA vehicles within the regular traffic and see what the impact of that was. So yeah, exactly what it says, assess the impact of those vehicles on the average traffic speed and excessive speeds that are there, and collect more information about how the user perceives the system. Well, there are some positive results, as you can see in the graphs. you can see the bottom ones of each day that are the benchmark data, and then where we drove with ISA vehicles, and you can actually see that more and more people obeyed the maximum speed. There were some limits of our tests, so it was quite hard to reach the certain penetration rates up to 20% of traffic, what we expected to. Also had some positive improvements, notably actually in the amount of vehicles exceeding and reducing the high peak speeds. Also, we had questionnaires for the users and how they perceived our system, and that was actually quite good. But we even made it better in our and it was really helpful for also the improvements of our system. And then actually the next thing what we did this year was see how is the digital and physical infrastructure in Helmond regarding the ISA, be ready for ISA operation, and how can Helmond improve that both digital and physical infrastructure to be ready for the ISA equipped vehicles in the upcoming years. What we found out there is, let's say 63% of the actual speed signs on the road were readable by our system, so that was then the physical one. 91% of the information on the digital map was correct, and combined in that, in theory, it would be, let's see, a coverage of 98% of the data that is useful for an ISA system. That means then, that it need to complement each other completely, and that's a thing ensure yet. What are some recommendations? Both rely on ADAS systems, or what you can physically see on the road is the physical, and have a digital speed limit as a backup. And have a kind of live map, so you can also include, let's say, roadworks, school zones, or more vulnerable locations in your ISA system, and reduce speed, of course, there. And have a kind of data loop, so not only sending the map data to the vehicle, but also from the vehicle what it actually sees on the road, and send that back to the map owner in that sense, so it can be updated and you can make better and better the more it's used. Some funny things that you can see there is, of course, also on the top is the Helmond sign. That is not really uniform throughout whole Europe, and that is things that are a limiting factor for the camera-based systems, because it doesn't know what to do with signs like that. And that is, how can you uniform those signs? Where should you put them to be ready for an ISA system? That are lessons learned and things to look at in the future. And I guess we're back to Matthieu.
Yes. Thank you, Niels. So I mentioned it in the beginning. Helmond has a double challenge. It needs both to build more houses in the years to come, but also to provide people with a pleasant living and working environment. This is why the city of Helmond and its stakeholders decided to design Brainport Smart District. By 2030, we will build 2,500 houses and a small business park in this area. Brainport Smart District is close to Brandenburg Station that you can see on the picture, one of the 4 stations in Helmond. From the station, it takes 5 minutes to go to Helmond City Center and 7 minutes to go to Eindhoven City Center. Brainport Smart District intends to be a living lab for innovations. It means that we challenge companies, but also universities and citizens themselves to test innovative solutions in that district. The district is still under development, and I have to be frank with you, the first inhabitants came in the district in April this year. We started from a white page, a green field would be more the image, I would like to say, with the ultimate goal of designing a zero emission zone with several key principles. The first principle is that no motorized cars can enter the district. The streets in the district are designed as spaces for the people and not for the vehicles. We want to stimulate active mobility to make active modes the most convenient for people to use. We want safe and qualitative connections by walking and cycling, notably to the train station as I spoke about. And we would also like the district to be an area where innovative and sustainable mobility solutions can be tested. So vehicles have to park outside the district. In principle, they are not allowed to load and unload within the district. New parking lots are at the outskirts of the district, and we intend to have in those parkings quite high standards. We intend to have a 0.2 standard, which means that one parking space will be built for 5 houses, which is quite ambitious. However, that in the first phase of the district development, we decided to authorize a higher norm of 0.5. This is necessary as not enough alternative mobility services are still in place. But when the solutions will be available, we intend to come to a 0.2. The UVAR in Brainport Smart District are quite strict, but for some specific targets, for some specific uses, we need to allow some permits and exemptions. However, we have been clear from the beginning. There is a need to limit as much as possible the exemptions. We want to avoid any general exemption. The standard, again, is that no motorized vehicles are allowed to enter the district. Persons with disabled parking card may request a permit to park and therefore to circulate in BSD. Our UVAR should not have a disproportionate impact on people with disability. That's not what we want. Emergency services have to intervene also as fast as possible, and therefore they need to be allowed to enter the district. And when there is no option, time windows to temporarily allow moving vans, heavy deliveries, or construction vehicles to circulate will be allowed to circulate on the ring road. Every case should be checked separately, and people requesting permits have to prove that they have no other solutions to do so. So we put strict constraints on parking and circulation in the district, but we want to keep the district accessible and open. This is why we believe it is also very important to offer concrete solutions for which we ask a behavior change. For this, we intend to create mobility hubs. We intend new mobility services to be offered in these places. Service for passengers like bike sharing, e-cargo bikes, car sharing, e-bikes, charging points, etc. And for the distribution of goods, which is also very important. Shared micro depots, parcel lockers, cargo bike delivery services. These complementary measures are a cornerstone for the success of a UVAR scheme. It is important that these mobility hubs are easily accessible by bike or walking to encourage people using them. There is one last point I want to focus on. A cornerstone has been the participation of residents in the development of the district. The objective is to co-create the solution with the citizens, fully involved in the design and testing. The restrictive measures and ambitious disruptive solutions we want will only be a success if they are rather understood and well accepted by the citizens, and if they have their say in the development. The participation of citizens and stakeholders has to be permanent and a continuous process. A group of involved citizens called the pioneers has been changing from the very first ideation phase of Brainport Smart District. A larger stakeholder group has been set up. It is very important, especially in the beginning, to attract people that are open to the ambition of the district. But the participation process is demanding both for the Brainport Smart District teams and also for the stakeholders themselves. The participation of residents and stakeholders is expected not only in mobility, but in all domains like energy, data, water treatment, waste, and so on. So it is sometimes difficult for the citizens to gather every week for participating in such meetings. Thank you for your attention.
Stay there. Get comfortable on your seats. And there we go. And I'd like to invite Samantha and Nimrod to come back up. That really fits, because we do still have some time. We've got you all lined up here in the front, ready to be hit by questions. And I can imagine that there may be questions to cities, particularly because you're the ones doing this on the ground. I mean, we can talk about the theory as your support partners, but you're the ones that are making things happen. So maybe I'll just open it up. And again, I guess, Isabel, you've got the online, if there's anything coming out that way. I guess I should get my phone to take any thing that's coming in.
So the camera, yeah, so the camera. You want the camera a bit further away? Better? Yeah, much better.
There you go. You can all be seen. Okay. Do we have any questions? We'll start with Lucy and then Derek.
And that, Samantha, you said about point, you very clearly came down in points or zones, and Nimrod, you said a small area that expands it. And my guess is that because City of London is such a small area, that's why points work well for you. Just the difference, because you said definitely points and Nimrod said definitely larger areas. Nimrod's looking at air pollution, you're looking at spaces.
I mean, the reason point closure versus zone works as effectively, it's a cost-effective thing. Instead of putting cameras at 6 points around a cordon, if you have one on one street, so more what we call a gateway, where you have a point closure or a gate closure, you're still stopping any through traffic. So that's our primary objective. And it means you've got fewer cameras that you're monitoring. I mean, it's a very similar principle to Ghent, where you've got different zones that you can drive into and drive out of again, but not through. So it's that principle. It's easier, it's cheaper to enforce, has a similar effect on the amount of through traffic. And also when you've got essential traffic, deliveries, disabled people in vehicles, it's easier to accommodate them without having a separate waiver system. So it means you can come up to that point from either side.
Actually, exemptions, yeah. And that works because you're small and because of the purpose.
Yeah, purpose. Whereas wider London, that's been done by TfL, is everywhere. That is a zone, and that's similar to the work that Jerusalem's done.
In our case, and we discussed it through Reveal, we couldn't find ourselves printing certain neighborhoods as greener than other neighborhoods. And the principle of equity was very dominant through the project and through our work.
It's true when you think about it that way. You say this is going to be a low emission zone, and then what does that mean for the parts of the city around it? That somehow, I mean, you can take it one hand, oh, we're being punished because we can't drive there. On the other hand, we get to benefit by having the clean air and the others don't. So this idea of thinking about the entire city, because I remember these discussions, and then it said, well, I guess it makes sense in this case to really address the entire city with it.
And also because your problem's air pollution, it wasn't just in the smaller area, because the zone will often have a beneficial effect over surroundings.
Certainly.
But it wasn't going to be big enough to sort of resolve the issue for the whole of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
It's also easier to close all the entrance to Jerusalem than to be focused just on parts of Jerusalem.
It's easier communication as
In
well.
communication as well.
Dirk, you had a question?
Yes, in fact, my question was also on this specific location approach, but I think this was addressed. But I have another question for Helmond, because you're quite unique. You are developing a new development, a new area. So probably you can be more radical than in existing situations. You have measures that go very far. For example, only one parking place for 5 houses. All the cars have to be outside of the area. Maybe a question about what is happening in the rest of the city of Helmond. Is this inspiring also the type of measures in the other parts of Helmond?
Yes, indeed, and that's what I spoke about Brainport Smart District as a living lab, because the idea is not to remain as a unique example, but to spread the good practices that are held in Brainport Smart District in other areas of the district. It is all the more important for us than we have been selected by the European Commission for being one of the 100 neutral and smart cities, and we have to reach specific objectives by 2030. So we are certain that we have to accelerate, and we have to deploy to have wider UVA plans in our city. That's for sure. Otherwise, we won't be able to reach these objectives.
Can I put this, maybe the inverse question to the other participants? Do you have in your city also new developments that are inspiring the way you address the quality of life and the standards, or do you refer to the general approach of the city or larger areas?
I'm not familiar at the moment.
Yeah, you've probably got the two cities with the least new growth.
Yeah.
London and Jerusalem. I think if you ask the question to Bielefeld or Victoria-Gasteiz, you might get a different answer.
Yeah, we'll come to the, you can hold the question, Jack. In the next round, we'll come back to, we can repeat questions, that's fine too. But yeah, we're talking about two completely different cities there, but it is interesting because the people can sort of self-select into this neighborhood so that they say they want to be a part of this experiment, they're interested, they're open to these ideas. And then you have this example for your city in Helmond that other neighborhoods that maybe can look at and learn from. And I know that's one of the things that you're trying to develop too, is this sort of package or toolkit. How do you do this?
Yeah, that's a point I want to focus on because Dirk mentioned that we can be more radical when we start from a blank page. That is true, and on the other hand, you need to know how to start. And it's not that an easy task to know how to start. And that was also a little bit our part of our issues in Helmond. And that's also why the work that was done with the experts in Reveal, and the work that and the examples we had through the example of other cities that are a little bit more advanced on the UVA aspects than Helmond is, was quite crucial. I mean, the example of Jerusalem in communication, of London, of Victoria-Gasteiz was really helpful for us to go forward in our plans.
To make it a little bit more concrete then, to say, why don't we try this or that?
And you need to build to combine the building blocks, as you will mention later. And this was very useful for us to make this building block combining exercise.
Joel, you had a question?
Yes, exactly. Particularly to Samantha, so at the end you mentioned almost, I think, by the way, the issue of people elderly and disabilities. To what extent does that affect or influence the design of infrastructure, walkability regarding shading, street furniture, access to facilities and the like. And the general question is related to that, which was actually to any of the panelists, is to what extent do you have goals, which I would even define as not just reduction of the negative aspects of urban vehicles and emissions, but to what extent healthy accessibility? To what extent, without losing the focus, is healthy accessibility really an overall goal, but still keeping it within the framework of urban vehicle regulations? Is that some things are always on the negative side of trying to reduce emissions and prepare for climate change?
Do you want to take take the.
So I think there's two things. There's the very physical design of the street, which people have been aware of for a long time, but there's some regulations that come from national standards which require us to do an impact assessment, a bit like people have been doing environmental impact assessments for a long time. This is now about an equalities impact assessment. So it's asking us to really much more consider people much more fairly across different needs. And you can just use it as a tick box exercise and say you've done it, but we've tried to really embrace it well. And during COVID, it was during the temporary closures we were doing, it was one of the issues that became very sensitive, not just for us, but for other locations. And it really identified how important it was. And we did do assessments on our temporary measures as well. And what's emerging is how careful we need to be about judging what other people need and actually hearing it from them rather than assuming we know. And that the point I made about exclusion, we've kind of moved on a bit from what's accessible physically into trying to understand, well, do we make it so difficult that we've excluded somebody? They might be physically able to do it, but we've made it so difficult that they're choosing to stay away. So that is very much a target in our design processes. So that's design when you're designing how a curb is and how wide a crossing is, but also in designing at that strategic point of what streets you're going to close, if you're going to close them, what does that mean, which way are the taxis going? And some of that's being kicked back from taxi drivers, from disabled people, disabled groups. And it's been, and I think the good thing is we're hearing what the problems are, and we're trying to make sure that those decisions are made with the right knowledge. Yeah.
Well, in regard to Jerusalem, no doubt that the Reveal project can make our thinking wider than it used to be towards global warming issues, health issues. It influenced the design of the city, it influenced many activities of the city. You have to remember, the Reveal project was only the second project of Jerusalem in the environmental fields. So from here, the sky is the limit.
If I want to say some words on Helmond, I think that what you said, Yoel, was really important, because we need to better sell to the people the positive aspects of our UVA, and not only focus on the constraints, on the parking norms, etc. This is not what we want to focus on. We want to focus on what will be the district in 10 years, what it will be, what it would look like by 2030, when the full district will be there, when there will be children playing in the streets rather than cars circulating, whether they are electric or not. It's something that we need to sell better, I think.
Question or comment, Lucy?
Not for next time. A comment on, we've gone through all the rest three. We haven't mentioned v-tron, and it's a connection of the ISA together with, how does it fit with UVAs? And where it fits, I think, is if you've got a limited traffic zone, having the requirement to enter your permit is, one of the requirements is to have an ISA. on some types of vehicles or all vehicles. We've seen that it still reduces speeds even in all vehicles. And it's like, so people keep asking, what's ISA doing here? Just to answer that question.
So you're only allowed to come into a zone if your car, basically, it's kind of like if you promise to maintain the low speed limit that we've established.
Yeah, I mean, so you've got a limited traffic zone, you have to apply for a permit, and so you can put requirements on that permit.
Yeah.
The permit for delivery vehicles might be 0 emission. The permit for residents might be Euro 1. The permit for taxi drivers might be an ISA because we can't trust you to keep the traffic speeds. If I mention any particular countries, taxi drivers in particular. For example, so you can play with the rules. What's your need? What's assessing what the problem is, and playing with the building blocks.
And I think it's really important when you want, for example, to implement dynamic speed. By dynamic speed, I think that we want to implement different speed limits depending on the period of the day. For example, when if you want to have an impact on the speed around the schools, to have a 20 km/h around the school and not a 30 km/h because of geopardice, we need systems like ISA to implement us. I think that's what Closer is doing in cities like Gothenburg and in Stockholm and so on, is also very important on that regards, to reduce the speed and to have a geofencing systems that can prevent the speed in a specific area.
It's the Closer project from the Linden Paul, and somebody will put at some point that link in the chat.
Yeah, there's a project taking place in Sweden right now that's also looking at ISA and geofencing. Yeah. Can I ask you, Niels, a question too, just with regard to, maybe just for people that haven't thought about so much what the role of ISA in this? Because you said, I think that you'd asked people how they felt about this.
Yeah.
I was wondering, did the drivers of the other cars on the road on these days, did they know that they were part of an experiment?
No, in that sense, only the 10 vehicles in that trial, I would say, were of course driving, and there you can see the impact on the rest of the traffic. But what you do notice is that of course you have an impact on the traffic, because that reducing speeding numbers is not only for the vehicles in the pilot, but also because they hold up the traffic back to it. In that sense, you notice it. It might be somewhat annoying, but that's the speed limit, and that's what should be there, right?
Yeah.
As a driver, you really feel the pressure of the vehicles behind you.
I would try to say it nicely, but
I'm sure. I remember actually old school of this a long time ago. There was, I think it was in Australia, and he created a bumper sticker that said, "Honk if I'm going too fast."
Yeah.
Just think about that. So that's sort of so the idea is the people around you, they don't know that this is a part of it, but you have X number of vehicles on the road, and that is effectively slowing down all of the traffic.
Yeah.
So all vehicles don't need to be equipped, although they will be by 2024. But
For new vehicles.
Yes, everything.
And then you also have to keep in mind that all the new vehicles still have the choice of being enforcing system or limiting system, because our system is limiting it. You can of course override it to keep it safe, but the chance that OEMs will just start with the informative system and you only get a before warning.
Yes, that you can override anyway, that it says, okay, well.
It doesn't limit you, it just says.
So you are going a little bit too fast. Yeah. Yes, question.
Yes, I was thinking about for the City of London, if that's okay. So one of my major interests in our work at C4K Zero Emission Freight Team is how cities are adapting for cargo bikes. You mentioned that you're facilitating, a positive environment infrastructure for those kinds of deliveries, and our office is on Queen Victoria Street, and we see cargo bike companies coming and going all the time. I wondered if you could expand a bit more on what that facilitation looked like from the city perspective.
So that is in progress. We have done, we identified 3 potential locations, one of which we got quite a long way in the tendering process to rent out space. We've got a lot of underground car parks, so rent out space for logistics to do last mile delivery. So basically bring your van in and then your bikes operate from that location. So identifying spaces that we've got is the primary one. We've then had a lot of dialogue with our neighbours and also done some more feasibility work on upstream or consolidation sort of right across the whole system. And the evidence is consolidation upstream is very well managed because there's a very good business case for it. So we don't need to interfere, it's already happening. But we were still getting the same feedback from the market that finding the locations for them to have the hubs. So we're very actively doing that with TfL and with neighbour boroughs, getting together saying how we can facilitate this because we're all interested in it. And then the next bit is what does it actually look like in terms of which streets are going to be, how we close our streets, how we restrict them. We've got our pedestrian priority programme restrictions that are starting to come in. And then the other part that the providers are trying to be, the bigger companies are trying to operate some best practice about how their drivers, their riders behave, because we do get that kickback from people walking that bad cycling is really bad, and we're all interested in making there being more good cycling. So there's a behaviour element and trying to insist that any contracts make sure there's a sort of good training programme. And then, yeah, our next stage will be how we make sure our streets have the right shape and space for what's emerging as the good cargo bikes, because there's a lot of different things on the market. I'm sure everyone's seen different pictures, but some of them are operating now. And one of the challenges that's been for us around that is we've got bollards at the moment which restrict some of those cargo bikes because of the terrorist attacks we had on our bridges. And so we've got a bit of a tension there, which again is one of our problems to solve, is how we make those work without everyone getting nervous again around potential terror attacks. But I don't think it'll be a problem. It's just making sure our designers are working to manage both issues.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Different challenges that cities face, aren't there, that you don't necessarily think about, or not every city faces, but some certainly do, and that needs to be considered as well. We've just got a few more minutes. Can I ask just a general question across to the three of you, or I'll put the two of you together as a pair, to say so out of the work that you've done and described here in Reveal, what do you feel most proud of, or what went really well? And then I'll also say conversely, is there something that you would do differently the next time? Matthieu and Niels, I'll give it to you first.
Okay, on the thing that I'm quite proud of, I would say that I'm quite proud of the partnership we have done in Reveal with v-tron, and I think that it's really important as far as Helmond is concerned to include in what we are doing the companies, and notably the small and medium enterprises, and it's I really say that through this project we had a concrete cooperation on what can do, and as I said, it may bring some plans for the future and notably on the dynamic speed around school I spoke about. I would like to say that on Graindorge Smart District, I think we are far from delivering the whole project, and I insisted on that. But I think that we can be proud of the framework that has been put on the participation, notably, and this from the beginning. I think it will be very important for the future actions that will be taken on the district level.
Interesting. Niels, do you want to add to that?
No, yeah, I think that is the most thing for v-tron side. I think it's really helpful to collaborate with the city and Helmond and yeah, see how to kind of start up such a thing, and you can see the limitations and the ways that, let's say, the local governments can help implement things as I think.
Yeah, it's interesting with this. I mean, new mobility in general, there's so much more that's going on with this private and public cooperation. So the idea of a city that's working together and getting the kind of data that they're getting from you about what you can actually do with this, with the signs, the digital maps and the signs. And there was a lot of value gained by the city of Helmond and also indirectly by the project, because we get to use that information as well. So
it's all the more important that we are a small city, and so we do have a limited capacity in doing the actions we want to do.
Yeah, that's certainly true. You have to find your partners. Nimrod?
In our case too, I'm proud of the acceptance that we achieved among many stakeholders. The Ministry of Environment Protection in Israel, in particular, who supported us with millions of euros. The public campaign was very successful. What I would do differently, maybe, the definition of polluting vehicles. What is polluting vehicle? Is very significant. At the moment, we have to change it. If we could start more more strictly, this is a big question. But maybe we could do it in such a way that it will impact more vehicles.
That's probably still to come in future stages, but yes. Fair enough. Samantha, for London?
It's been such a strange time to work in that it's very hard to say what would we have done differently, because we've had to be very reactive and cope with the circumstances. But what I'm proud of is I think our working relationships with our neighbours and with TfL has improved during that time. I don't think it's just not particularly because of this project, but because of the work we've had to do but it's affected this project, that we've had to be more adaptive and communicate with each other better. And I think there had been very much a them and us relationship before, and we're now in a more, we're all in it together, and if we help each other, then we all get to where we want to be better. And I think that's been felt across. I get that reflected from other officers in other locations as well, but communication has improved. So
huge.